Hello Reddit. Business owners of Reddit, what's the most obnoxious reason an employee quit had to be fired over? We had a young intern helping with some hardware inventory tasks. It wasn't uncommon for laptops not to make it back to us as projects would hoard them from terminated employees, but one day we noticed his backpack open and a laptop of model we used sticking out. Sent him to the other side of the building and checked the serial number, and yep, it was one he reported as missing during a recent inventory. Opportunistic theft is one thing, but bringing it back into the office every day, just wow. I had a subcontractor on a job for my company try and convince the client that they should dump me and go with their business and they would undercut me by 10%. Learned this from the client, who asked me to find another person to service our contract. Employee had corporate card, charged a vacation, purse, fossil watch, takeout, along with overall, being miserable to work with. Had laptop stolen within weeks of joining. Fired her, and a few days later a watch catalog from Fossil showed up at the office with her name on it. Have active court cases for all the theft. I'm not a business owner, but I'm a student manager. I don't really have the ability to fire someone, but I had to in this case. This one kid was trouble to say the least, and I asked him to go check the bathrooms to make sure they were clean/stocked. When he asked about the woman's room, I said just to knock and make sure nobody was inside. Apparently he banged on the door and screamed, in his very deep voice, "Who in here? Everybody get out." He then entered the bathroom where a poor little elderly woman was inside the stall and continued to bang on the stall yelling, "Get out." He was yelling so loud I actually heard him and went to investigate. The poor woman was whimpering and calling the police, and he just was the kind of person who had no idea how he came across. There was many weird issues, but this obviously topped the cake, and I told him he was done and needed to go home. The poor old woman was so upset that she refused to leave the bathroom, and I had to call her son for her. My dad owned his own business working as a color corrector/editor. He had this one employee who had been there since day one and ended up becoming similar to an assistant manager. My dad owned that company for 10+ years, and just recently, he had to fire the assistant manager because apparently he was telling employees and customers that my dad hates gays, people who aren't white, his kids, his whole family, that he's a terrible person, etc. Basically driving all business away, pushing my dad's company towards bankruptcy. Turns out he was a narcissistic sociopath. My dad's just sad his employees never trusted him enough to tell him about what this guy would say to them. Not a business owner, but at a previous job we had issues with food being stolen from the break room fridge. The company made a big stink about it, and it kept happening, so they very obviously installed security cameras in the break room. Like big fucking cameras in plain sight, pointing at the fridge, with our bosses being very direct about "There is the camera. You really want to lose your job over eating some owned sandwich?" Few days later guy gets fired for stealing food. Literally on camera, just grabbing people's lunch out of the fridge and eating it. I used to do some consulting work and hired a woman to help out. Mostly clerical stuff and whatnot. I flew down to St. Thomas for a meeting and got a call from Sonatral at 10:30 p.m. She had keys to my building, but didn't know about the alarm. Basically, she and her boyfriend brought another couple down to have a foursome in one of my offices I had converted to a bedroom where I could crash if I worked late. So I called her. She answered mid-coitus and acted normal, albeit a little tipsy. I talked about a few mundane details I needed to relay to her anyways, and then mentioned to make sure she only was ever at the office between 7 AM and 7 PM, since there was a silent alarm that would call me with audio of activities in the building. When I got back in town her keys were sitting on my desk. Not a business owner, but this happened to one of my coworkers. Guy was extremely nerdy, and this is from a self-admitting nerd, and absolutely obsessed with Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Literally the only things he would ever talk about, and would talk about them for as long as you'd let him. One day I'm on register and I see him being dragged out of the store by cops in handcuffs. Turns out he had been shoplifting tons of playing cards of those above listed games. At least $500 worth, as our store policy was to let an employee get away with it up to that amount before busting them. I think because the charges stick harder or something. Edit. See some people talking about theft categories and how they differ from state to state. If it helps anyone, this story happened in New Jersey. It was a manager of mine. He always asked for a ton of time off, and I always gave it to him. He put in time request form for 2 days that I blocked because I had something to do that weekend. I told him I'm sorry, but I can't give you those 2 days. It was to go to a wrestling show, which was what he normally asked days off for. Not a funeral, wedding, etc. It was a Friday and I walk in, and he had written a note hanging up saying he wasn't going to be coming into work that weekend and wished to continue working for me. Had to cancel my plans and fired the guy. I was hiring for a government contract that required everyone to be drug tested. I told the guy in the interview that he would be drug tested. Hired. Failed the drug test. Fired. When I told him he failed the drug test, he said yeah, I knew I would. Left an open, half full can of one of those spiked seltzers in his locker. The lockers have transparent doors, and he left it unlocked. His explanation? He found it on the side of the road, and he was planning on recycling it later. What a guy. It's not every day you see someone with that kind of commitment to sustainability. I don't own a business, but one of my friends once quit a job I got him at the place I worked because it was too easy, even though he wasn't even doing half of the things he was supposed to do, and the few things he was doing poorly. Not a business owner, but I was a supervisor at a factory and got my buddy a job 3 months in, and he was doing a good job, and I was thinking about going to my boss to talk about promoting him to a level 2 job. It never came to that because he came in one day, went straight to my boss, and told him he's quitting by saying I just need to look for better hours. I really think I can get paid playing softball 3 years later, and he still hasn't gotten paid. A woman called in sick to work. Her excuse? Her pet cat wouldn't let her leave the house. She was dropped instantly. Dealing drugs out of the back room of my bookstore was the deal breaker. 2 years later I still have people come in and leave quickly when they see it's not him behind the counter. Employee was videotaped smoking a joint by a temp while on the clock. Employee figures the truth will come out or the video will surface eventually, so he confesses. Before we knew the video existed. We are relatively liberal when it comes to marijuana, so we demoted him and put him through substance abuse counseling. Upon completion and a negative drug screen, he can resume his normal duties. Fast forward 2 months, employee's position is reinstated. Everything is going well until I walked out to the patio one day to find a marijuana plant growing in a flower pot. The flower pot is in clear view of a security camera. Roll the footage back several weeks and there is said employee pulling seeds from a bag, placing them in various pots around the patio. He was let go the next day. An employee of ours was an avid Jeep enthusiast and liked to do his own repairs. Come into our warehouse from a late business trip to find the top half of his Jeep completely removed from the bottom half and welding fumes everywhere. He had been sneaking his car in during night hours to do his modifications alone and against direct instructions not to use our equipment. We handled open containers of food, so no bueno. I was only an assistant manager at the time and didn't fire her. I also didn't hire the dumbass. I used to work for a local chain burger place. We tried to teach this girl to bag the fries at first because we only had 2 fried products and it should have been simple, but she kept licking her fingers before she would grab a fry carton. I continuously had to tell her to wash her hands and try again. Our district manager showed up that day and got so frustrated with her that he told her to go clean up the lot. She then almost got hit by 2 cars in the parking lot because she wasn't looking where she was going. She got fired that day. She got hired at the donut shop next door after that. I went to get donuts one day. She licked her fingers before she grabbed the bag. to put my donuts in and gave me the wrong change back.